This is On the Couch on 100.4 FM on Radio 786. This evening we speak to world-renowned outspoken cleric on Palestine and human rights, Reverend Dr. Munther Isaac, a minister of the Evangelical Lutheran Christmas Church in Bethlehem. From 80% to now 2% Christians in Palestine, we find out what Dr. Reverend Munther's mission is here and how we can be of support to the people of Palestine in the fight of liberation and freedom. Good evening, Dr. Munther. Welcome to On the Couch.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Welcome to Cape Town. I wanted to start off with Christmas. For me personally, Christmas is a very interesting time because I have a very large Christian family. And so it's kind of difficult to navigate both worlds. But last year's Christmas was very intense. I would never have imagined children celebrating Christmas with so much pain. And also realizing that Jesus, peace and blessings be upon him, was from Palestine. That was his land, and how the land is being destroyed. So how was Christmas for you?
It was definitely a very difficult and painful Christmas because usually we associate Christmas with celebration, with joy, with festivals. In addition, of course, to the prayers. But this year, last year, no one was in a mood to celebrate. And we were, in addition to that, mourning the loss of dear ones. And at the same time, fearful for their lives and fearful that the war would escalate to other parts of Palestine, to the West Bank. I fear that still exists today. So it was really a very difficult time that actually allowed us to connect in a more spiritual way with the meaning of Christmas when we only focused on prayer and found our comfort in prayer. And it definitely took a different meaning and a new dimension. The whole meaning of Jesus being born among us in Christianity, the idea is that God became one of us. And to do so among an occupied people, whether 2,000 years ago or when we think of it now, it gave us a tremendous comfort, a sense of peace and calm in the midst of a very brutal and horrifying genocide. And as I said, allowed us to connect in a more spiritual way with the true meaning of Christmas.
And I'm sure the true meaning of purity, because as we know, Jesus is considered to be pure and his birth a miracle. So that celebration in itself, again, very difficult for me to watch, to even understand, because you say occupation and you think we're supposed to be celebrating or we're supposed to be happy, maybe even very much excited that, this human being was born on our land. So it's difficult to process.
Yes, but it also showed the vulnerable side of Jesus when he became a human, and he was, a victim of violence himself as a child. Children were killed in Bethlehem according to the gospel stories, and the Holy Family, Joseph and Mary, had to flee from Palestine into Egypt, out of all places. In the same way, we see Palestinians now trying to flee to Egypt through Rafah. And so it becomes a very real story. We're accustomed to thinking of Jesus as if he was from a different universe. We draw him many times in Christianity, and that's why, they draw him with marvelous icons as highlighting his divinity. But that's why, to me, it was important to put him in a kufiya under the rubble to show how near he was to us, how real he was, how one of us Jesus was in our pain, in our suffering, and in our vulnerability.
Reverend, I've been thinking about the Nakba, and I've been thinking about what was life before the Nakba, and then October the 7th, thinking about Bethlehem and thinking about Jerusalem. There is talks of this wall, which I feel keeps on growing and keeps on kicking out indigenous people in the most violent ways. Talk to us or describe to us what Bethlehem and Jerusalem was like before we see all these horrors.
Yeah, but sadly our history is one of colonialism, of empires trying to control Palestine or controlling Palestine. So prior to the establishment of Israel, we were under the British mandate. And during the British mandate, by the way, many Palestinians were denied the right to return, including many Palestinian Christians who are now in Latin America. So there was the British mandate. Before that, we lived under 500 years of the Ottoman Empire. You go before that, there were the Crusaders. And this is our history, one empire after the other invading. Yet somehow the people survived, and we continued to live and take care of our land, our inheritance, for us as Christians, of our holy sites, to make sure that we continue the presence of Palestinians and of Palestinian Christians in that land. I always think of the potential of what could have been if there was no Nakba. You have to remember, when Israel was created, more than or almost half of the Palestinians became refugees. So try to imagine the traumatic effect, but also the actual effect it had on people in terms of land, prosperity, economy, trade, everything. This was a catastrophe on a huge level. To think that half of the people were displaced. And Israel was established on 78% of historic Palestine. So we've lost 78% of our land. Again, think of that. That meant the destruction and displacement of close to 480 Palestinian towns and villages. They no longer exist. They exist in our memory. They exist in our conscious. Palestinian refugees never ever forgot where they came from. They wouldn't just say we are refugees. They would tell you the name of the town or village they came from, the key as a symbol. But then to think 480 towns and villages destroyed, no longer exist. It was a huge catastrophe. We call it the Nakba, the catastrophe of Palestinians. I don't think we recovered because the Nakba did not end. Because since the establishment of Israel, more and more land is being confiscated now in the West Bank. So Israel is confiscating land within the remaining 22% where Palestinians said, okay, we'll have a state there. Since then, Israel is building settlements inside the West Bank, confiscating land by force or by unjust laws. The absentee law is one of them. And suffocating Palestinian lives within very condensed communities. So if you come to the West Bank, where I come from, in Bethlehem, you would see suffocated lives within our cities, and everything outside of the cities, the land, the roads connecting the cities, are fully controlled by Israel. And Israel is expanding its not just grip, but building settlements, colonies inside the West Bank. Also suffocating any possibility of Palestinian expansion or natural growth. So again, I can't help but think of the potential. What could have been if we received our right of self-determination to establish our own homeland, our own identity as Palestinians. And I want to emphasize this point very much, that the Nakba did not end. The Nakba continues today, and what's happening in Gaza is horrific. It's the same story. It's Palestinians being displaced, killed, traumatized, and more and more loss of territory and lives. Our Nakba continues.
I want to jump on the word memory, because I think that's important, because you could either choose, and I think with people that are oppressed, it's difficult to choose the best memory to keep you going, because every memory means something, even though it might be painful. When we speak about memory and your journey, Reverend, to where you find yourself now advocating for Palestine and bringing about the awareness, where does your memory start, where you decide that I'm going to tell the world about Palestine and one day, God willing, we'll be free?
It starts, before we talk about memory, I think it starts with the present, because it's our lived history. When I advocate for justice for Palestinians, or when I tell the Palestinian story, I'm not telling it as an outsider, but I'm telling it as someone who has lived the first Intifada in 87, 88, later the second Intifada, someone who experienced Oslo, some experienced the ups and downs. The ups of Oslo, we thought liberation is coming, and then the downs of what happened afterwards. As someone who've listened to stories from his parents about the 1967 war and what that meant, and then they told us about their parents, our grandparents, 1948, how they survived it, where were they, and so on. And our history still lives today because, for example, I have relatives who are in diaspora, in exile. They can't come back, they can't even visit, who were born in Palestine. We have homes, but they're not allowed to return by Israel because Israel controls who comes in and who comes out. And it's a living memory because we're telling the story one generation after the other, and we go to our records, municipality records or church records, and we found our ancestors' names in it. I was fascinated recently to discover writings of my grandfather in the 40s, late 30s, about religion in a Christian magazine published in Palestine before the establishment of Israel. And so this is kind of, we continue to tell the story after, one generation to the other, never forgetting our rootedness in the land. And of course, for me as a Christian, that story is so old. It begins with the inception of, with the beginning of it all. I preach every Sunday in a church that is literally 5 minutes away from where Jesus was born. It shocks me that many in the Western world don't know that Palestinian Christians exist. And it's like, where did Christianity start? Do you think it started in Texas or in... of course we exist. This is where it all started. The first church was in Jerusalem. So for us, it's literally, when we think of our community, the Palestinian Christian community, we always say we're the oldest Christian community in the world. And we're the continuation of that oldest ongoing Christian community in the world. So we have very, very deep roots in this land.
It surprises me too that people don't know that they are Arab Christians or Palestinian Christians. I think it's just shocking that the Christian community within Palestine is on 2%. I think that's dangerous. I don't know if that means that they are in the diaspora or that they are killed. So I'm not sure what that means. And I think if we speak about, you spoke about your grandfather and he's writing about religion. So there's obviously a legacy of Christianity and a tradition of Christianity. So that's very scary. Are they in the diaspora?
The majority of Palestinian Christians live outside of Palestine. And the majority of them live outside of Palestine not by choice. There were stages to our exile, forced displacement. If you look at just the last 100 years, many left during the Ottoman Empire. The problem for economic reasons, but also not wanting to be part of the Ottoman army. Yet they were not allowed to return by the British mandate. So this is when many Palestinians, especially from the Bethlehem area, lost everything because they went outside to do work, trade, and then they could not return. A big number of Palestinian Christians became refugees in 1948. They lost everything. And this was a big hit on our numbers, but also on our percentage because of the Jewish immigration into the land. So all of a sudden, before Israel was created, 20-30 years before Israel was created, we were close to 12-15%, some would say, according to which census you read. And then immediately we dropped to 2 or 3% of the population. So we dropped in population as in percentage as such an influence, and then in numbers, of course, because of the Nakba. And like all Palestinians, Palestinian refugees were denied the right to return. The international law grants us this right. There are UN resolutions towards that mean, but of course, Israel does not respect these resolutions, and they're protected. So that has been our problem. And since then, when Israel occupied the land, and when Israel was established in 1948, if you were a Palestinian from the areas where Israel was established and you were not present in the land, you were also denied the right to return. Similarly, when Israel occupied the rest of the land, the West Bank and Gaza, in 1967, if you as a Palestinian physically were not present in the land when Israel occupied it, you lost your right to come to that land, to your home, actually. So this is the way in which Israel makes sure they control the demography, by preventing Palestinians from returning, and then by pushing us outside, whether through violence or through unjust laws or through the restrictions. Right now, many Palestinians, Muslims and Christians alike, especially young families, are leaving because they want to secure a better future for their children. Unemployment is high. Movement is very much restricted. I'm here in Cape Town, and it's just wonderful to drive in a car without checkpoints, without being stopped, without feeling that, every other block there are checkpoints. We don't have space to grow naturally. You come to Palestine, you just meet very crowded cities, unemployment, and then violence. Now settler violence, the Jewish settlers are becoming more and more violent. So people leave, people choose to leave. All statistics show that Palestinians are leaving because of the restrictions imposed by the occupation. It's an apartheid system that we live in. So the majority of Palestinians right now find themselves in the diaspora, and many of whom, if they even want to return, they're not allowed.
I'm just thinking of the saying where it says, home is where the heart is. And if you can't go back to your heart, I don't know how you survive in anywhere, basically. I want to touch on white supremacy, Zionism, racism, and how that infiltrates religion and how we understand texts. Because just the fact that people don't know that they are Palestinian Christians, for me, is problematic. Makes me wonder what they read. I mean, I'm Muslim. I read the Quran, and I'm aware of this. What happened? How does these ideologies influence religion and how we read it and perceive?
Yes. When we talk about Zionism, I think it's really important to remember that Zionism as an ideology is an ideology that found its inception within the wombs of European Western empires. There were Christian Zionists before there were Jewish Zionists. And at its core, it was a racist idea. A racist idea because they thought Jews cannot live among us in Europe. And the solution for the so-called, as they called it, the Europeans, Jewish problem is for those Jews to become Christians. For that to happen, they have to be gathered first in Palestine, then Jesus would return, and this will bring in the end times. And they thought that since these Jews are living with us now, and if we help them go to Palestine, they could also aid our colonial ambitions. let's not forget that Israel was created out of the womb of the British Empire by European Zionist colonizers. And as I said, the idea of the creation of a homeland for the Jewish people in Palestine originated among Christians before it actually originated among Jews. And the concept of a land without people, as the Europeans described it first and later the Zionists, for a people without a land, is a very racist concept, because the land had people and they knew it. And but since there was a more important colonial ambition, they looked at the land and they saw it as empty. The land had people, but the people were not of equal worth to the incoming settlers. They were not of equal worth to the colonizers who aided, or to the empire that aided these settlers. So at the heart of all of this is this racist mentality, which assumed that we're entitled and we can basically divide someone else's land, and suggest that Palestine is divided between the indigenous people and the new incoming settlers. They assume that they are entitled to tell some Palestinians, go to Jordan, go to Lebanon, and we see this even today. You look at the way many American politicians talk about the Gaza crisis, and some would say, clean it up, send them to Egypt, create spaces to them in the desert. They totally ignore our rootedness, our national identity, the fact that we've been living here for generations, that we belong to this land. And to them, they look at us as, commodities. They can be shifted. Again, this is at the heart of all of this. And I think this is important because many assume it's a religious conflict. And even many think that Christian Zionism is basically or predominantly a religious idea. This is how people read the Bible. The Bible is clear. Jesus' message is one of peace, of love, of compassion, of mercy. God cannot be a tribal God. The Bible is clear. But when you have colonialism and racism, you make religious texts say what you want. I mean, I'm here in South Africa, and to me, as a Bible scholar, as a Palestinian, but as a Bible scholar, the idea that someone could extract apartheid from the Bible is mind-boggling. Where do you get that? I mean, it's the furthest things from what the Bible teaches. It's the furthest things from the teachings of Jesus. But what is apartheid at its essence? It's colonialism, it's racism, and then you make the religious text say what you want. And I think this is the same with Christian Zionism today. You can't justify what Israel is doing from the Bible. And you can't just bring this idea that Jews lived in Palestine and that's why they are entitled to be in Palestine today based on a religious text that's 4,000 years old, and that's it, and the whole world must accept this. I mean, where do you get that? As a way of solving political disputes today? And what about the teachings of Jesus himself about peacemaking, justice, righteousness? What about the people of the land who have been living in Palestine for generations? You just assume they should go. So my point is that we need to look beyond the religious texts as if they are the problem, and understand Zionism for what it is. It's about coloniality and it's about racism. And then you make the Bible say what you want it to say.
Yeah, I actually seen two interviews of yourself with AJ Plus, and I thought it was very interesting, and I think that gave me a different perspective of, how Christianity is viewed and how Christian people are viewed, but more so how it's viewed in the West and how it manipulates people. And it's very interesting. I feel like Reverend Edwin is giving me a sign that we don't have much time with you. But I find that the way we view texts obviously gives us the direction in which we want to go and that which we want to believe. And it's very difficult to understand, because you say, what about the people of the land? What about the people that were there? What about our grandmothers? What about our legacy? And everyone else is like, what do you mean? Israel has the right to defend itself. Israel has the right to exist, and it's very confusing and it's hard to wrap your mind around it. And when you speak about national identity, I can only understand one of the main reasons for Palestinians, staying on the land and speaking about Palestine is to hold on to at least whatever we have left, even if that's 1%. But I'm wondering, Reverend, when we speak about the children of Abraham, often in this conversation, as you say, some assume that it's a religious war or a religious conflict. Others assume other things. So when we speak about the children of Abraham and how we should echo in one voice, do you feel like that's a part of your work being here?
I think it should be the calling of every person of faith to bring humanity closer to God and to one another. Jesus summarized our faith, his message, by 2 commandments. Love your God with your heart, with all your heart, all your mind, all your soul, and all your strength. And the second, he said, is equal to it. Love your neighbor as yourself. And Jesus said, this is what the law is about. And this should be our calling. We will have differences in how we understand God. But God is one. God is the same. Many times people in the West ask me, you say the word Allah. I say, of course we say the word Allah. It's a word for God. And they say, but do you and the Muslims worship the same God? And I look at them in amusement and say, how many gods are there? Do you really believe there are multiple gods? There's one God. And, yes, granted, we have disagreements in how we approach that God and how we understand his nature to be. But at the end of the day, no one can deny that we're siblings in humanity.
Yeah.
That there is one creator God and one humanity. And we have to figure out ways not just to live together or tolerate one another, but to share God's land, God's gifts with one another. Not just despite our differences, but because of our differences. And in the midst of, create this beautiful diversity in which sometimes we have to celebrate this diversity, see the good in the other.
Yeah.
Without giving up your distinctions, without giving up your right to promote your faith freely, because my faith is everything to me. The way I carry myself, my principles, my ideas, my ideals, they all come from my faith. That doesn't mean I should stop, sharing freely about my faith. And in a time when there seems to be so many polemics and religious extremists, I wish we could compete among one another as religions in who loves the neighbors more, who serves the other more. Imagine how much difference we could make in our world. And to bring it back to the Palestinian context, sadly, I think religion has been part of the problem. But I know of many, many religious people who want to see that changed and to see religion become part of the solution. And all of us believe in the God of justice. The problem is, are we willing to extend that justice to others? Jesus, when he was asked about the commandments and he said, love your neighbor as yourself, someone asked him, so who's my neighbor? And behind that question is the assumption that we love and serve only those who look like us, who are of us, who are of our same tribe, family, religion, ethnicity, nationality. Where do we draw the circle? Who's in and who's out? And Jesus answered with a beautiful story of, in the Gospels we call it the Good Samaritan. And the essence of that story is that everybody is a neighbor. Every human being is a neighbor. And the commandment to love your neighbor as yourself extends to all humanity and not just to one particular people group. So let that be our calling. And yes, I am a proud Palestinian, but all of my work has been motivated by my faith in a good and just God who calls us to show compassion and love our neighbors and defend the oppressed. And this is what it's all about for me.
So yesterday I was fortunate enough to be at the service. It's been a while since I've been at a church, and I must say it was very peaceful. I think I just what caught my attention is the God of justice. Before we even get to justice, the God of love, then of justice, and how this love needs to be manifested. And if we believe in God, and we believe that God is love, and we love our fellow human beings, then we wouldn't allow for this genocide to continue. Then there was the emphasis on justice. It's one thing to love, to share it, but the justice speaks to how we need to take action. And prayers are welcome, but not enough, and we need to do more as a people. And I think more so for people of faith, people who believe in God, and people, justice-loving people. When we speak about action, there's so much being done. And I know I asked the question yesterday about feeling overwhelmed and feeling tired and feeling like, it's 76 years and months are going by. We count in days, literally. Every day there's a new kind of study that we're finding out, new information about the bodies that are, being found in the rubble. And we realize the betrayal of the West and the superpowers and the wonderful UN that's supposed to save the world that isn't saving the world, and what reflection that is if we choose to follow a people that speak a lie continuously. Reverend, where do you find, I know you say faith is important to you, but where do you find your source of strength and courage when you still keep speaking about the Palestinian struggle?
As we continue, or as I have been very critical of the West and of countries and so on, and been saying the world seems to be okay and silent, in reality that's not true, because the streets have been very loud all over the world, especially in the global south, but also all over the world. And I find we as Palestinians find strength and courage in the movements, the global movements around the world. Today is this big movement in American universities. It's very promising. This is where change happens, among grassroots movements. All over the world there are interfaith gatherings for Palestine. There's a growing number of Jewish leaders who are speaking out against not just this genocide, but the system of apartheid. And even in Arab countries, whereas the leaders themselves haven't been vocal or doing enough, the people in the streets have been very vocal. So we see change among many grassroots movements, among the massive demonstrations all over the world. And I want to also emphasize that we see change and hope, not change, but really hope, in the global south and among those who experience colonialism. And I keep saying that, to me, the idea that it was South Africa that led the court case, the International Court of Justice, the ICJ court, against Israel, was so profound, was so important, because that's where the moral credibility lies among those who suffered from apartheid, colonialism. More recently, we see Algeria very active in the UN, another country that suffered from colonialism. Yes, it's an Arab country, but a country that understands the meaning of a genocide. Millions, hundreds of thousands were killed in Algeria by the French. And I think this is where not just I find hope, this is where I hope future alliances will form. And where we challenge the monopoly of the so-called civilized West to our world and world systems. Gaza has revealed the bankruptcy of these Western systems. and it has revealed their hierarchy, their hypocrisy. It has revealed their hypocrisy. They continue to lecture us on human rights and the international law, but when it comes the time to implement it, they fail to even speak out about war crimes, obvious war crimes that are happening under the world's watch. So we need, as countries with this moral courage and credibility, to come together. And this brings me to why I'm here. I think it's important that we build these alliances, these partnerships amongst ourselves in the global south, in previous contexts of colonialism or modern contexts of colonialism, and we join forces with one another and turn the table and challenge this monopoly or domination of the Western countries. Because again, it didn't just reveal, by the way, their hypocrisy, their racism. And I've been saying it, they don't look at Palestinians as equals. It's very evident. It has been established to us that they don't view us as equals, and as such, they disqualified themselves from speaking about human rights or the international law.
Final question, Reverend. So this evening, I know that you're going to be at Masjid al-Quds, and you are speaking about Palestine and the awakened conscience of the world. That's a side thing. I would really like to know at least something joyful about your life, being a Palestinian, being a reverend, being a father, being a husband, being a human being, that you'd love to share with us.
Palestinians, whether myself or others, are really normal human beings who love life. We love friends. I love to spend times with friends, doing simple things like playing cards. I love watching football with friends, with my kids. As I was doing the talk yesterday, my son was calling me just to tell me that, our team is winning.
Who is the team, Reverend?
It's Liverpool. And of course, Muhammad Salah is an icon now all over the world. We love life as Palestinians. We love the beauty of life, the simplicity of it that you find among family, among friends. And I think one thing to know about whether myself or the Palestinians, family is centered to us. It's so centered, and family relationships. I always joke to my Western friends that I have a small family in Palestine. We're only 200 people of my clan in my town, and they're shocked. Oh, 200 people from
200 people.
And that's, again, maybe a small family. The extended family is even bigger than that. Family is central to us. Family values are centered to us, but we love to spend time with one another, hang out with one another. Nothing brings us more joy than doing barbecue together as friends. These are the kind of things I enjoy doing when I'm home.
And inshallah, you will get to enjoy it in a country that is free and liberated.
Amen. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Reverend, for speaking to us this evening.
Thank you. Thank you for having me again.
You're welcome.